Hey guys, welcome back to another Battlefield 6 Season 3 video, and today we're gonna have a look at what was actually changed in Season 3 compared to Season 2 and what kind of effect it will have on your gameplay. And we get right in with the changes to the weapons. Here we got a new animation that automatically lowers your weapon when firing is not possible. So when you are in the customization screen after spawning, for example, or when you're using the Comoros. They also changed the hit indicators to better show the amount of incoming damage. Before the update, all indicators had the same size, and now the arrow on the indicator differs in size depending on the amount of damage that is dealt to you with one bullet. So here in this case, the smaller indicator is from being hit by a pistol and the bigger one is from a sniper shot. Also, when you're aiming down sights and you take damage, your weapon is now being moved into the opposite direction of the impact instead of the same direction like it was before, and this doesn't seem to impact the stability of your aiming as much as it did in Season 2. And what was also in the patch notes is that the recoil for some automatic weapons with a high damage per second was increased, and here Maxic did a great side-by-side comparison already of some of the affected weapons, so all credit to him for the footage. And for some of them it's barely noticeable, but for others like the TR7 or M4A1 for example, it's definitely more noticeable. And this was made to reduce the long and mid-range capabilities of those weapons, but it barely has an effect on close range. Nonetheless, you should know about it because it might affect a weapon you frequently play. Moving on to the UI, here they removed the ping brackets when you double tap the ping button on an enemy. Now it always ends up being a normal red dot ping without the brackets, no matter if you just tap it once or tap it twice. And they slightly changed the class icons so they are more visible above your teammates' heads during a match. It's not much, but they look a little bit more bold. Then we have the engineer's training path. On the combat engineer path, the vehicle regeneration passive that was on level 2 of that training path was replaced by the new skill minesweeping. Once this is unlocked, it will highlight all enemy mines that are within 30 meters around you in world and also on your minimap, but not through walls. And now that we warmed up a bit with the weapons, let's get into the meat of this update, which are the changes to gadgets and vehicles. And we start with the gadgets. First of all, the spawn beacon got a little update and now shows the amount of spawns that are still available as dots next to the beacon's icon in the deploy screen. And when you want to spawn on your own beacon yourself, you can also see that all 4 points start blinking, which indicates that the beacon will be destroyed after your spawn. There were also further adjustments made to the mortar and how it resupplies from crates. So now the time it takes to get a new mortar is at 30 seconds, which was at only 10 seconds before, and it only starts to resupply a new mortar when the old one was destroyed, which is also the same mechanic that was added for other gadgets like the recon drone for example. And the mortar's accuracy at longer ranges was further decreased, and now hitting something is basically pure luck. So it's not very useful on longer ranges anymore. Moving on, we also have the anti-vehicle and anti-aircraft gadgets because these got some massive changes with this update. So for C4, the damage was increased from 334 to 350 against tanks, but stays at 350 against helicopters and 1000 against jets. The AV mines now only deal 390 damage to tanks, while before it was 660. However, they've increased the maximum number of AV mines that can be placed from 6 to 9, and the mines no longer despawn after their owner dies. But what they added is that the AV mines now glint at close range to make them more visible, especially in cluttered environment. And the AV mines as well as the acoustic mines no longer get triggered by light transport or personal transport vehicles. And especially for the acoustic mine, they have added an indicator showing that the projectile has launched and where it is. And the mines also got their damage adjusted, and they now deal 480 damage to tanks, while before it was only 387. And The slam mines were also changed. Here they tweaked the damage range to values between 199 to 363, while before it was 162 to 380. Plus, they can now be triggered regardless of vehicle movement speed, which is probably the biggest change. So while you can still avoid triggering AV mines when you crawl with your tank, this doesn't work for slam mines anymore. No matter how fast or slow you pass them, they will always get triggered. And when I tested them, they even got triggered when the vehicle was not moving at all. So this could make those mines a lot more useful. And then we have the wide array of launchers, but before we get into these different changes, first of all, some general changes that have been made to how launchers interact with vehicles. Because what's new is that all lock-on weapons now deal consistent damage to tanks and aircraft, and the angle or damage zone of the vehicle doesn't have any effect on the damage values anymore. But this only counts for the lock-on weapons. For non-lock-on weapons like the RPG, for example, the angle and the damage zones still have an effect, of course. And to those damage zones, there were also changes made. So damage to turrets now always deals 75% of the base damage of the launcher. Damage to the body always deals at least 100%. Hits at a favorable angle from the side will deal 150, and hits at a favorable angle from the rear will deal 200%. So the lower the angle to the side or the rear of the tank, the higher the damage, and the higher the angle, the lower the damage. However, they also lowered the amount of different values per angle, so you have a wider range now within which you can deal consistent damage. And what was also changed is that weapons and gadgets no longer deal different damage values to the different types of vehicles. Instead, the health was changed of the vehicles, so the main battle tanks are now at 1200 health instead of 1000, and the health of the armored transport vehicles is now at 800 instead of 1000. Now, getting into the separate changes for the launchers, we start with the RPG that had its damage against tanks lowered from a range of 186 to 594 to a new damage of 173 to 460. So especially the highest possible damage that you can only deal to the rear of the tank was significantly lowered, which means you always need at least 3 shots with the RPG to destroy a tank, and the damage against jets and helis is still the same at 1000. For the M136, they also tweaked the damage a little bit, and it now deals between 207 and 550 damage against tanks, while before it was between 185 to 581, and the damage against jets and helis is also still the same at 1000. The MBT law has seen some more changes here. Its damage against tanks was lowered from 294 to 240. The damage to helicopters was reduced from 1000 to 520, and against jets from 1000 to 800. But in return, the initial speed of the missile was increased from 30 to 100 milliseconds, so more than 3 times the speed. Its maximum speed was increased from 75 to 300 milliseconds, and the missile acceleration speed from 50 to 100 milliseconds. So even though it deals less damage now, it has become significantly faster, which allows you to line up shots much faster as well. A launcher that had its damage increased though is the MAS 148. Here the damage to tanks was increased from 350 to 465. Helicopter damage is now at 1000, that was before at 842, and jets is still at 1000 damage. And here they also reduced the lock-on time from 1.8 to 1.4 seconds, and you also start with 1 more missile in your pocket because this amount was increased from 2 to 3. Moving on to the anti-air launchers, we have the SLM that had its damage against tanks increased from 190 to 200, but the damage to aircraft stays the same at 650. Its lock-on range was reduced from 650 to 550 meters, and the maximum missile speed was also reduced from 540 to 480 milliseconds, which unfortunately is very noticeable, at least as infantry. And lastly, we have the IGLA, and here the damage against tanks was also slightly slightly increased from 189 to 200, but the damage against aircraft also stays at 650. And for this launcher, the lock-on time has been reduced from 1.2 to 1 second, but the maximum missile speed was also reduced from 640 to 480 milliseconds, and the missile acceleration has been increased from 65 to 100 milliseconds. And the last gadget that was changed is the laser designator. Here, the duration of the effect was reduced from 20 to 9 seconds for both soldier and vehicle designators, and the laser designator also no longer reduces the lock-on time for anti-air missiles, but the gadget now provides a 20% increase to lock-on range across all lock-on weapons. However, the reduction of the effect by more than half is probably the biggest change here. And finally, we have the changes to the vehicles themselves. Here, the most significant change is probably the one to the vehicle health, because the health brackets we had before have been removed. Before the update, this meant that once your health was below a bracket, the vehicle couldn't self-repair to full health anymore, and for full repair, you needed a repair station or an engineer. But now that the brackets were removed, the vehicle is able to automatically repair itself up to full health. However, the delay for this self-repair to start was increased from 6 to 12 seconds, but then the rate for this self-repair was increased from 5% to 10% per second, which is actually incredibly fast. The only thing that is still slowed down is when you are at critical damage, so when the health bar turns red, and then the self-repair is slowed down by 80%. But before the update, the regeneration was completely disabled when in critical health. So you can fully repair now from critical up to full health and without the help of an engineer or a repair station. Plus, tanks are no longer immobilized when they're taking high damage from a launcher, for example. The only thing that can still immobilize tanks are AV mines. And when it comes to the movement of the ground vehicles, they also significantly improved the handling and turning speeds. The turning speeds of the turrets were also increased. The ADS time is faster than before. And when using the vehicle boost, the bar is now no longer emptied when you interrupt the boost, and the boost can be reapplied when the bar is recharging, except for when it was fully emptied before. But this makes vehicles feel so much more agile and a lot easier to use and a lot easier to maneuver than before. And in addition to this, we also got some changes to 3 of the vehicle upgrades. First of all, the reinforced plating upgrade that had increased the damage resistance but reduced the speed of the vehicle due to the additional weight was completely removed and was replaced by contingency systems, which, when the vehicle is at low health, accelerates the cooldown of countermeasures. The counterfire radar was also partially reworked. It now passively spots the soldier or vehicle that damages your vehicle for a short amount of time, but only for yourself, not for your teammates. However, when you activate the upgrade manually, then the spotting is for your teammates as well, and spotted vehicles are also automatically laser designated for this duration. And the last upgrade is the thermal smoke. Here, the active duration was increased by 3 seconds, the cooldown was reduced from 20 to 16 seconds, and probably the most important changes, the smoke will now deal damage to enemy infantry within the cloud. It will destroy all C4 that is deployed, and when you stay in the cloud with your tank, all incoming hits will only be registered at 75% damage, so the lowest possible. No matter at which angle or damage zone they are, even if you're getting hit in the rear of the tank, it only deals the smallest possible amount of damage. And the smoke now also blocks the acoustic mines from detecting the vehicle, so this is probably the most useful vehicle upgrade now. And lastly, we have 4 additions to the vehicle UI. First of all, jets and helicopters will now see an indicator on the minimap that shows whether or not they are currently below radar, which protects them from enemy lock-ons. There was also a threat indicator indicator added for jets and helicopters that shows nearby enemy jets that have your vehicle in their sight. So when a jet is behind you or next to you, you can now see this with this indicator. There's also a new threat indicator that highlights incoming aim-guided missiles, so not only lock-on but also aim-guided, and tanks now have an indicator for when they are being repaired, which is shown with these lines of crosses next to the health bar. And this is also shown to the engineers that are repairing this tank. And yeah, that was it for today. I know this was a chunky one, but I hope that the visualization to these changes helped to understand what kind of effect they have on your gameplay. And if you enjoyed this video and you want to stay tuned for more content like this, don't forget to drop a like and subscribe. And I'm gonna see you in the next one. I'm the Catwoman and you are awesome.